Pokemon Scarlet and Violet got a free upgrade with the launch of the Switch 2, and sure, God knows it needed it. But the game I've been thinking about, it's Legends Arceus. This one didn't get a patch, no performance boost, no visual upgrade, no announcement of one coming, just the same Switch 1 build running on new hardware. But I had to see what that meant, because Arceus is, hands down, my favourite Pokemon game on Switch. It's rough, it's messy, but it actually tries something new. Big open zones, stealth catching, proper exploration, and a world that's almost held together. The problem was, performance constantly pulled it apart. Blurry visuals, aggressive popping, resolution that tanked the second you started sprinting. It was ambitious, but it never quite landed. So here's the question. Without a patch, without developer support, just raw hardware alone, can the Switch 2 do anything to help this experience? So in this video, we'll break that down in full. We're talking visual clarity, dynamic resolution, popping, frame rate stability, and whether or not this is finally the way to revisit Arceus, or if it still needs a proper second chance. In this video, we'll break that down in full. We're talking visual clarity, dynamic resolution, popping, frame rate stability, and whether or not this is finally the way to revisit this entry. Also, expect lots of Switch 1 to Switch 2 side-by-side comparisons so you get a real picture of the results. Alright, so before we do get into this, if you're new here, welcome. This channel is all things Nintendo Switch, no fluff, just honest performance reviews, general reviews, news and deals. So if you find this helpful, subscribing really helps a small channel like mine. Alright, let's see what Pokemon Legends Arceus looks like on Switch 2. Now first, let's talk about what this game actually is, because Legends Arceus wasn't just another Pokemon release, it was a real shift in direction. Set in a much earlier version of the region, you're pulled through space and time and dropped into a world where Pokemon aren't exactly trusted. It's wild, barely mapped and dangerous. Your job, help build the region's first Pokedex, not just by catching creatures in battle, but by actually observing them, sneaking through grass, watching them eat, studying their moves. And yes, there are battles, but most of your time is actually spent exploring open zones, moving between biomes, and filling out research tasks. There's a rhythm to it. You're actually out there, in the world, doing the work. And the way it handles wild encounters, overworld evolutions, and mission structure, it all felt fresh, like the series was finally willing to take risks again. But that ambition, it came at a cost. Visually, it was bare bones. Resolution was mixed. Performance was decent, but not perfect, and I'd love to say it was a case of the hardware not keeping up with the concept, but let's be honest, with Pokemon games, they tend to just rush them out the door. Optimization, it seems, is nearly always an afterthought. So that's why I wanted to revisit it now, to see if the Switch 2 can quietly do the hard work for them. So visuals, and I'll be upfront, the difference here is minor. This isn't a dramatic leap, and you're not going to be blown away by the push from the new hardware. But the more you play, the more it starts to matter. And the first thing I noticed, immediately actually, was the texture detail on buildings. The Galaxy headquarters, you can actually see the brickwork now. The lines are sharper, the surface detail is more readable, and it gives the whole structure a little bit more weight. It's subtle, but once you spot it, you start picking up on it everywhere. Signs, rooftops, the wooden texture on crates, even the battle arena floors. The real improvement though is in the dynamic resolution, and this is where Switch 2 genuinely pulls its weight. Now on Switch 1, it used dynamic resolution pretty aggressively, so basically anytime you were sprinting across open terrain, especially in places like Obsidian Fieldlands, the image would soften noticeably, the resolution would be dropping to hold performance, trees would smear, grass would blur, and anything in the distance just became a pixelated mess, and it happened a lot. On Switch 2, that softness is gone. The resolution holds firm far more consistently, both docked and handheld. The game just looks sharper, text is clearer, character models pop more, even the UI benefits from this improved output. Hopefully that's clear from the footage on screen. Right now as I sprint through this environment, you'll see Switch 1 versus Switch 2. With this said though, while you're watching that, it's not all good news. The improved resolution actually draws more attention to the game's inherent weaknesses, namely the low texture detail and the pop-in. And yes, pop-in is still a problem. Grass appears in chunks, trees load in late, Pokemon still spawn far too close to the player, and then they basically vanish if you take a few steps back. So yeah, the Switch 2 doesn't fix any of that. If anything, it actually makes it more noticeable because the image is now sharp enough for you to see the seams more clearly. So yes, look, it looks better, sharper, cleaner, more stable, but don't expect it to suddenly feel modern. The limitations are still here, they're just being presented in higher definition. Then load times, they are improved, but like honestly, they weren't much of an issue to begin with. In fact, they weren't an issue at all. It was already one of the faster loading Pokemon titles on Switch 1. On Switch 2, basically, it's a tiny bit faster. You'll save maybe a couple of seconds at most here and there. So yeah, I don't think this minor improvement will have anyone rushing back. Frame rate wise then, this was already pretty stable on Switch 1, and that's largely thanks to how aggressively it scaled resolution to stay on target. It was smart about it. You know, even when the visuals took a hit, the game mostly held its 30 FPS target. That said, it still wasn't perfect. You'd still see the occasional stutter or momentary dip, especially in the field lands again, where, you know, when there was a lot going on or happening at once. And it also wasn't unusual to see it drop to around 28 frames per second in those spots. Not huge, I know, but still, you'd feel it. On Switch 2, it's locked, properly locked to 30 frames per second, and it holds. In all my testing, I didn't see a single drop, which puts it ahead of the original build. A nice, stable, consistent 30 throughout. And honestly, that's exactly what I was hoping for. It gives the game a sense of polish it didn't quite have before. So yeah, overall, it's not a dramatic leap. It didn't need it, but it's a meaningful refinement. The kind of quiet stability that makes everything else shine just a little brighter. So what's the verdict? And well, this isn't a transformation. It was never going to be. It's Switch 1 to Switch 2. Basically, it's hardware only here, pushing the game just that little bit further. And it still very much looks like the game it was back in 2022, you know? There's no patch, no texture upgrade, no change in how it draws the world or handles asset streaming. Pop-in, again, still there. This terrain itself just loads in these awkward chunks, and you're still going to notice how simple these environments are once you do stop moving. But even without a patch, the Switch 2 helps. The dynamic resolution, which is the game's biggest visual compromise, is now not apparent. The whole image is sharper, more stable, and just nicer to look at. Frame rate holds firm at 30 and even climbs beyond it in places. Load times, yeah, a little bit quicker. UI and texture clarity are improved just enough to make everything feel cleaner. So yeah, basically it's subtle, but it stacks up, and over a few hours of play, it starts to make the game just generally feel a little bit better. No, it's not modern essentially, and no, it doesn't magically fix the engine level limits. These have always held Pokemon games back. But what the Switch 2 does is remove the friction. It takes an ambitious idea and lets it run without struggling, and again, exactly what I was hoping for. So yeah, if you skip this one the first time, this is now absolutely the best way to play it. And if you're like me and you already love it, it's a pretty decent little excuse to go back. So will you be playing this one on Switch 2? Let me know in the comments. I'd still love to see a full-on free upgrade dropped, just like they did with Scarlet and Violet, but I do think that might be wishful thinking. Either way though, again, great time to revisit it. So if you did enjoy this one, do me a favor and subscribe. Really helps the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers all.